Hi, Susan here. If you're just joining, welcome. Uh, just getting some technical issues sorted out. Uh, I'm speaking at once on Zoom and Facebook Live. So if it appears that I'm not looking into the camera, or I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but I think this is happening on both platforms at once through jerry rigging. So welcome. Uh, my name is Susan Piver. I am a meditation teacher and a writer and founder of the Open Heart Project, part of which is something called the Daily Dharma Gathering. Every day or 6 days a week in the Open Heart Project Sangha, we get together with a different teacher every day, 6 days a week, I should say. And we each time the teacher speaks about the same theme. So if you're interested in hearing from a Buddhist teacher 6 days a week live, because please consider joining the Open Heart Project Sangha. I'll put a link in Facebook so you can check it out further if you'd like to. This month in the Open Heart Project Sangha, which means community, our theme is what is called basic goodness. And the Buddhist notion is that all beings not only possess basic goodness, but are basic goodness, are basically good, which, one sort of glance around the universe would make you go, I don't know about that, because it's crazy out there right now. It's crazy out there. So, is it possible? Is it reasonable? Is it wise even to think, well, yeah, people are basically good? Is it is that true? Is it naive? I don't know. I'll tell you what I think. So, one of the first things that me too, that everybody tries to do when you are given the contemplation, are are all beings basically good? I'm not talking just about human beings, but all sentient beings. One of the first things that happens to all of us is we start to uh, come up with all sorts of reasons why that's impossible. That's impossible. And it's really easy to come up with those kinds of reasons. If you take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle and write proof that people are basically good or beings are basically good, children and hugging and smiling, awesome, all of that's true. But then when you start to make a list down the other side of the column, Adolf Hitler and horrible politicians and puppy kickers and yeah, you could make a really long list on that side too. And I think the mistake comes in when we try to get one side of the list to argue with the other side. uh, that's never going to work, because you're always going to be able to come up with a new argument about why basic goodness is real or not real. So it's very helpful in examining this issue to step outside of conventional thought or theories, concepts, strategies, anything intellectual, basically, because anything intellectual can always be countered by something else intellectual. I don't mean to sound anti intellectual, but fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have an academic bone in my body. So it's this is what makes sense to me. So, what else could we do to examine the truth or the possible truth of basic goodness beyond intellectual considerations? So, I have some suggestions for you. The first suggestion is, instead of relying on intellect, to begin to rely on experience. Now, experience and intellect are often hard to tease apart because something happens and we attach a narrative structure to it. Very important, wonderful. We all got to get through life doing that. We can't just be all like everything means nothing or everything is equal. We have to analyze and understand our experience in the world around us. But when it comes to understanding basic goodness, our experience is a better tell than our thoughts. And so, by experience, as opposed to thoughts about experience, what I mean is, what do you encounter through your sense perceptions, which are very direct, and what do you feel as you move through your life? Feelings and thoughts, you could make the argument, are somewhat different. Thoughts happen, I don't know, in your mind, I guess. Feelings happen in your body or in the atmosphere around you. So if you were to rely on your sense perceptions and your feelings as they manifest in your body, I suggest that would be a more expeditious way to establish your stance on basic goodness. So the list, pros and cons, not really very useful, I have found. When you look at your sense perceptions and your feelings as they manifest in your body, which is pre-story, pre the story that we naturally attach to those feelings. I'm sad because of this, or I'm hurt because you said that, useful. But prior to those thoughts about the feelings are just the feelings. One thing that sense perceptions and feelings have in common, I personally find this interesting, I hope you will too, is that they are actually communications with something outside of ourselves. So when you look at the color red, that is a communication. When you taste, your spaghetti, I had spaghetti for lunch. There's a kind of communication between you and what you're eating. When you hear, of course, music is an extraordinary communication. Something is being transmitted and something is being picked up, is the definition that I'm using of communication. And when it comes to feelings, something provokes those feelings, something out here or in here, but something arises that creates a reaction in you. And that is also what I am calling a communication. So, to summarize, if you are interested in thinking about basic goodness, again, rather than making a list of there's also awesome things on earth versus there's horrible things on earth, I would start to look instead at the communications that I have with the phenomenal world and how they manifest in my sense perceptions and my feelings. They come on the waves of communication rather than thoughts or intellect. Don't take my word for that. Experiment with yourself. Experiment with this for yourself and see. So when it comes to communication, of course, there's also just verbal communication. And that's kind of what I wanted to focus on this evening, uh, riffing on and adding to what Kevin Townley has been talking about previous nights this week in the Daily Dharma Gathering. Kevin is a wonderful teacher, really smart, really soulful, has a deep view, and has been talking about some of the basics of Buddhist thought, beginning with the Four Noble Truths. Life is unsatisfying, grasping makes it unsatisfying, it's possible to stop suffering because you just stop grasping. And then the Eightfold Path, which is sort of the map, how you do those things. And he spoke the other night about right view and right intention, which are the first two of the Eightfold Path. And the third is right speech, which I think is very interesting. It's way up there. It's the third step on the Noble Eightfold Path that leads to a complete liberation from suffering, is the way you use words, the way you communicate with fellow beings through words. So it's very, very important. And when we look around our world today, of course, we see tremendous evidence of wrong speech, really horrible, horrible speech, horrible the way we speak to each other. Horrible the way we speak to each other is sufficient, I think. I don't have to explain what I mean by that. We all know that that's what's happening. So I wanted to share with you the four qualities to avoid in order to establish right speech for yourself. These are traditional Buddhist teachings. I did not make them up. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to do a short meditation. And then if you have any questions about right speech and these four elements, please don't hesitate to leave them in comments if you're on Zoom or on Facebook. You can post any comments or reflections as well right there, and I would be happy to address them in this talk, which is going to end in about 10 about 10 or 12 minutes. So it's going to be brief. So the first aspect of right speech is no lying. I mean, it makes sense that lying is wrong speech. No lying is right speech. And I'm sure none of you are like, you know, liars, but if you start to examine your normal speech, or when I examine my normal speech, I find that I am lying all the time. And it's not like I'm trying to be sneaky or get someone to buy something from me or by making up things about it, but they're little slips. You know, if someone says, if I leave the house and someone says, "Where were you?" I might say, "I was out to lunch. I went out to lunch," but really I wasn't out to lunch. I just wanted to get away from everything. I was taking a walk and I just didn't want to talk about it at that moment. So that's obviously a very, very small thing, but it's also, there's an element of precision in our speech that when it goes missing, it's not like you're actively lying, but you're not actually telling everything. You're not, you're rounding up or rounding down in the way you describe how you feel or where you've been. And, you don't have to be geeky about it or didactic or, you know, OCD. But if you can get through the next hour without lying, you know, alert me, because uh, it's incredible how when you start to pay attention to the truthfulness of your words, at least I find these little instances where it's not completely truthful. So that's the first thing, no lying. The second thing is no divisive speech. Divisive speech, I'm sure you all know what that means. It's, you know, it can be anything from, did you know that those people over there were horrible, when I've never met them, but you want me to know, you want already to divide me from them, to things like, I don't really know if that person is right for the job, when in fact you want that job. So divisive speech is anything that sort of separates you or me from the immediacy of the moment. And it can be cruel and vicious on one end of the spectrum, and just sort of lazy on the other end of the spectrum. Let me know if this makes sense, please. So no lying, no divisive speech. So you don't want to talk smack, basically. You don't want to put people down. If somebody asks you what you think, that's your opinion, you could tell them, but you don't want to plant seeds of division through your speech for your own benefit. That's the kicker. When you're doing it to make yourself feel better, I need all my allies. I need everyone to think the way I do. So therefore, I'm going to diss this person or this idea. Well, that you're in wrong speechville. So something to be aware of. The third quality is no abusive speech. That would be nice. So abusive speech is anything from, what we would all imagine, yelling horrible things at people, whether it's verbal or in writing. But abusive speech can also just simply be in your tone. You can say the nicest thing in the world, the words can be nice, but the tone can be horrible. So that's abusive. No abusive speech is, that would be good. I'll just repeat that. And the final quality is, I think, is actually the most difficult, is no idle speech or no gossip. So of course we all talk about people, because people, for many of us, those are the most important parts of our life, or the relationships we have with others. And it's not wrong to talk about people. People in our lives are often, like I say, of the things of the greatest interest and value. So it's not wrong to talk about people, but it's wrong to talk about them idly, for your own entertainment, or for prurient reasons. I think I'm using that word correctly. Or because you want to make yourself feel better about something. So for, I was lucky to be raised. My mother is not a gossip. My parents, my father's passed away, but neither of my parents were gossipy. And they just instilled that in us. It's not good to gossip. And I sort of kept that with me. They've told me other things that I didn't do, but that was one that I kept with me, and I found that to be really valuable and really important. So, no lying, no divisive speech, no abusive speech, no idle speech are the components of right speech. So, you could then posit that right speech is telling the truth, saying things that unite people, saying things that are compassionate rather than abusive, and saying words of meaning rather than idle. So when you start to bring attention to these things in your speech, it will be quite fascinating. I think. I find it so. And potentially extremely liberating for you and the people around you. And our world really needs that right now. We need people who are brave enough and skillful enough to employ right speech, or to at least try and screw it up and try again, which is, I would put myself in that category. So please think about that. Please think about that. And let's close with a short practice of meditation, which is the key to right speech, because right speech, no lying, no abusive speech, and so on, it's possible when there is a gap between what you are experiencing and what you say. When there's no gap, your chances of utilizing right speech are greatly diminished. But in meditation, we work a lot with how we speak to ourselves, by noticing when we're absorbed in self-talk and letting go. When we let go, there's a gap. The gap is everything. And we come back to the breath in meditation, so that when we are in the world, we can let go of our self-talk. I like that when you said that. I didn't like it when you said that. To come back to the person in front of us, which is the very foundation of right speech altogether. So let's do a short practice, please. And if you have any questions or comments, put them in chat, or they're on Zoom or Facebook, and I would be delighted to try to answer them. I see a question from you, Sandy. It's a good one. I'm going to get to it. Let's just practice for like a couple minutes, literally. So begin, please, by establishing a posture that feels comfortable to you. If you're sitting on a chair, which probably most of you are, great. Sit with your feet flat on the floor, or you can cross your legs, whatever's comfortable. If you're on the floor, sit in the way that is comfortable for you there. And relax. Sit up straight and relax at the same time. And let your shoulders soften. The hands rest on the legs, palms down. The breath is natural, in and out through the nose. And the eyes are open, and the gaze is cast down to a spot that's comfortable for you, given how close you are to your screen. So our eyes are open because we're awake, and our bodies are relaxed at the same time. So notice what it feels like to be awake and relaxed. Awake and relaxed. That's the combination we're looking for. Feel yourself breathing. Feel the inhale and the exhale. It's different than observing the breath or noticing it or feeling it. It's more immediate than observing it. Let your thoughts be as they are. They don't have to stop, and you don't have to change them. Just let them be there while you allow your breath to be in the forefront, the foreground, and your thoughts in the background. And if you get lost, just come back to the breath and reestablish it in the foreground. So we'll just sit really for a minute or so. So please bring your very short practice to a close, and thank you. And if you have a question or comment, please put it in Zoom or Facebook, and I'll be happy to try to answer. Sandy says on Zoom, so if you're on Facebook, you can't see this. I'm curious about wanting to talk or use speech to alleviate anxiety. Do you recommend silence or talking it out when feeling anxious? Well, that's a really good question, and the answer is totally individual. You know, if you have a trusted friend that you can talk it out with, that's great. You know, do what you need to do to take care of yourself and be gentle toward yourself. I, if you're, don't have access to someone who's there to listen to you, then it's more difficult. When you say, "Do I recommend silence?" That sounds to me like it might be a little onerous, like "shut up," and that is contraindicated. So talk it out with a friend, talk it out with yourself through journaling, talk it out with yourself by talking out loud, whatever you need to do. Um, and when there is no one to talk to, feel it. Feel the anxiety without the words, unless that is a trauma trigger, in which case, don't do that. But what I mean, if I feel the anxiety, is where is it in your body? Does it make your shoulders go like this? Does it make your breath short? Just for a few moments, feel that. And when the story arises, I feel anxious because of this, or I need to do that to stop, let go of that like you would thoughts in meditation, and just allow yourself to be with the sensation. Again, unless that's triggering, in which case, don't do it. But this could create a kind of softening between yourself and the anxiety, because then we get in an argument with the anxiety. stop, go away, I wish I didn't have this. But if you can relax with it just for a few moments, that, that might be useful. So thank you for asking. And you're welcome, Russell. Russell says thank you. I say you're welcome. Uh, Sandy says I usually want to use my boyfriend as someone to listen, which can end up more frustrating. Yes, I understand. I understand. So we have to use our good judgment with our loved ones about asking for their help or using them, as a uh, using them. So on Facebook, Mary says, "Be with the sensation, softening. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for listening." Jason says, "No question, just gratitude. A well-needed Dharma talk. Right speech practice seems more beneficial and valuable in this moment in time than ever." I completely agree. And it's so nice to see you, Jason. Thank you very much for being here. And you're welcome to Elena and to Rob. Rob, it's lovely to see you too. Um, so if you're watching this after the fact on Facebook and you have a comment or question, feel free to leave it. I would be delighted to respond. And if you want to connect with me and other Buddhist teachers on a regular basis, please consider joining the Open Heart Project Sangha. When we try to bring things like right speech into our life in a world where other people may not be trying to do that, it's really good and useful to have a home base of people that are working on the same priorities as you to support you and to touch base. So, to close, I want to do what is called dedicate the merit. That is a traditional way of closing a meditation practice session. And I'll chant the traditional. You do not have to. But as I do, if you could rouse in your own mind the wish that all beings could benefit from your practice, that would be great. So we practice, we receive benefit. We don't try to hold on, rather, we try to give it away, which turns out to be the best way of holding on. So, in the way that makes sense to you, rouse the aspiration that your practice and that our time together could be of benefit to all beings, which includes you. Doesn't mean all beings accept you. So, by this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you.